Well, hello, friends, and welcome back. My name is Cole Lesher, and this is the Growing Together podcast. This podcast is an extension of a class that we have on Sunday mornings called Growing Together. And it's a community with the goal of cultivating a place where young and old and everywhere in between can find a place to belong and a place to grow with one another in the ways of Jesus and his church. And so these recordings you are about to hear are from a series we recently did called Stories of Transformation, where we interview and we talk to people and we ask them this question. We ask them, how has Jesus changed your life? How has he transformed your life? And this is a beautiful question, and I'm grateful for the answers, and I'm grateful for our guests to talk about it, because our stories, our testimonies, and the like are pictures and a tapestry of the beauty of how God has brought so many different people together in his church. So it is not a comparison game, but it's a beautiful picture of the diversity of the kingdom of God. And so I'm incredibly grateful for these folks to share with us about what Jesus has done for them. This week, Nathan Burgess shares his story and his story of how Jesus has changed his life. Nathan's an elder at Central, a good friend of mine, and I'm grateful that he took the time to do this interview. There's a Q&A session that follows this, and hopefully that is a blessing to you. And I'll stop talking. Thanks again, Nathan. Thanks again, Mike. And here we go.
All right, well, good morning. Pastor Cole is at Spring Storm this weekend, and I'm sure they're having a great time. So he asked me to step in, and I'm going to be continuing this series of interviews and testimonies, and a quote that he's titled Stories of Transformation. Today I get to do it with Nathan Burgess, one of our elders here at Central, and it'll be a good time to hear about things that God has done to help Nathan grow in his own faith and life with the Lord. And so we'll do that for a little while. We'll talk, and then we'll turn and we'll have some questions and answers after a bit. So be thinking of some things that you'd maybe like to ask or discuss as we go along. That's okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So here we go. So Nathan, just tell us a bit about how did you come to know Jesus? What was your home like growing up, and how did that play into just coming to know the Lord?
Yeah, so I grew up in a Christian home. So I never really knew a day that I didn't know who God was, didn't believe in God. I had parents who were very serious in their faith and were very intentional in the way that the rhythms that they had in their daily lives. And so I learned pretty early on to have a healthy fear of God.
Yeah.
I was a rule follower, so that played into it as well.
Yes, as one compliant child to another. I feel that deeply, yes. That's great. So as you were growing up, with your family and church, were there particular moments along the way that you remember as being especially important in just helping you grow? Particular moments of growth that you remember? Yeah,
definitely. There were. I feel like my faith journey has been just these moments where I can say, okay, this is where I saw God work in my life. This is where I can sort of stand on firm ground in my faith. I think about one of my favorite stories is in Joshua, the beginning of Joshua, when they are crossing the Jordan River, and there's this mini parting of the water where the people of Israel officially enter into the promised land where the Jordan is dried up. And when they cross over, Joshua immediately has them assemble a monument out of 12 stones, one for each of the tribes. And it's left there as a memorial to remember what God did in that place at that time. And so I think when I look back at my story, I have these moments that I have memorialized where I say, okay, this is the proof of God in my life, and this is where in doubt, I go to.
Yeah. So what are some of those particulars? What are some stories that you could share?
Yeah, sure. This is, I guess there was a moment in high school where, does anybody know of Model UN? Anybody do that? So I participated in Model UN, and we were going on a trip to the University of Virginia and to do there was a big hubbub about like who's going to room with who. We're going to be in hotels, and I had kind of a group of friends that we were going to be together. We'd sort of decided we were going to have the four of us in a room, and I wasn't able to be there when they were registering, but I came back after, and I found out that they had like kicked me out of the room and put somebody else in, and I was like absolutely devastated. And I got thrown into this random room, didn't know any of the other guys, and I had a grudge most of the trip. But I found out that somewhere midway through the trip that they had planned to bring alcohol, and they realized that I was a stumbling block in their plans. That they needed a patsy that they could just coerce into doing what they wanted. So I realized that, and it wasn't necessarily that. I think it was just that they knew who I was. They knew the character that I had, the faith that I had. That we don't want to risk him being in our room. So they ended up getting somebody else, and it ended up like as the trip finished, I ended up connecting with the guys that were in my room. I ended up having a really successful Model UN experience. And it just ended up being this amazing trip for me, and they all got caught. It ended up really bad. And I just felt like I felt God's protection in that situation. I felt like he kept me away from a situation that could have, I don't have to know how I would have responded in it because I didn't get tempted in it. But I just felt like that's one of those moments in high school that I look to. Yeah,
that's great. Who were some particular people? I mean, obviously your parents. What did it look like in terms of the way your parents kind of helped nurture your faith at home? And were there other important people as well in the life of the church that were mentors or important influences on you?
Yeah. So my parents were definitely very impactful. I think, like I mentioned, the rhythms that I would come down every morning just to see my dad in quiet time. So he had this rhythm of being in prayer and reading the Bible every morning. And I saw it as I grew up. You could see that he had never arrived at whatever we would consider, arriving in full faith, I guess. He was constantly in process, which I think was very impactful for me. And I saw it in his character as he would, his patience was better, and like you saw like material improvement in his character and his like way of life that even to this day, like when he comes and visits, I still come down in the morning and see him in quiet time, which is pretty neat. My parents were both involved when I was in high school in the college ministry at our church, and the church that I went to was pretty close to kind of the equivalent of WashU here, but the University of Richmond in Virginia. And we just had constantly college students hanging around at our house, weekly meetings, and then guys would. There were a lot of guys that didn't have good father figures at home, and so they kind of gravitated to my dad. And just seeing that as a high schooler, like these young men gravitating to my dad was really impactful. Just realizing that he was somebody that I should be pursuing like they were as well.
It's not the typical high school experience to think, other people think my dad is cool? That's great. So as you as you got into early adulthood, what are some ways that you can identify ways that God has helped you grow? What are some of maybe the attitudes or the habits or some ways that you've seen God just sort of shaping who you are, changing who you are in some ways?
When I was in college, I went to a Christian college, and shortly before graduation, I kind of had this moment. I was like thinking about where I was going to be, where I was going, and realizing that the life that I had lived up to that point was pretty much in a bubble. And I, like, as far as real world experience, I didn't have much. And so I was like, what do I make of this? How do I prepare for what's next? And I kind of landed on, I guess it's the end of Luke chapter 6, where it's the parable of building your house on solid ground. And I realized that up to that point, I had been building this pretty good foundation, and that I just need to lean into that, and whatever comes my way, I have this solid ground that I can depend on. So I moved back to Virginia after college and got a job at Wachovia Securities as a liaison on the bond trading desk, and that's sort of a job that you're between the traders and our brokers and other traders at other firms. And it was very interesting to start out there. I remember I didn't know anything. And so the first couple of days, I'm just basically listening on the phone to other liaisons around me as they are talking and doing business and trying to figure out what's going on. And the guy next to me, like on the third day, he turns to me just in a moment, pause, and he's like, "I've not heard you curse once. Are you a Christian or something?" I was like, that was my like, I'm not in the bubble anymore. I realized that I hadn't said anything. I was at that point, I was just trying to absorb what I could, but it was apparently very evident, just sitting there, that I was a Christian. I learned later that he went to church, so I don't know what exactly he meant by that. But
like profanity is not in the employee handbook,
right?
Yeah.
But it was interesting. So I moved back to my hometown. I had my church community, and I had friends there, but I also was developing these relationships with friends from work. And about 5 years in, we merged with a firm here in St. Louis called A.G. Edwards, and our jobs were moving here. And I had a big struggle with like what am I going to do? Because I had no intention of moving. I kind of saw, not necessarily in the best way, I saw my job as a bit of a means to an end, and kind of my ends were my family and my community there. And so why would I move? Why would I follow my means to St. Louis? And so I turned down a couple offers, but I said I'd help out with the transition. So I was flying back and forth to St. Louis, and at some point, the travel was it got to me. I was like, I got to make a decision. And so I eventually accepted an offer and officially moved here. And there was a pretty good community of people that I moved with that we it wasn't a very good merger. And so we weren't making good connections with our coworkers that were from St. Louis. And so we banded together, and we just kind of lived life together. We would just go out to eat, go to concerts, do different things. And it was a really neat group of people, but none of them were Christians. And they knew that I was a Christian, but they didn't necessarily know, to the extent that my faith was, pretty serious. And it was the first couple of Sundays when I moved here, my phone would just keep buzzing during church. It was like, "Hey, we're going to brunch. Come." It's like, "Where are you?" And at some point, people started to realize, wait, don't bother Nathan on Sunday mornings because he's at church. But it was neat to sort of for them to sort of get to know me better, because I definitely invested a lot more in Virginia with my Christian community and not as much with my work community. But it kind of flipped here, at least initially. And I wasn't necessarily sure how it would all be accepted by them, but it was really neat just to see that people respected my faith, and they respected the fact that I was a Christian, and probably mainly because I respected them, and I needed them as much as they needed me in kind of the moment that we were in. And so I don't know, it was really neat. I was able to be pretty bold with my faith amongst my friends because they loved and respected me. I actually learned a lot about friendship from them. I felt like they were better friends than I was, which was kind of convicting. I felt like I should because I'm a Christian, I should be the better. But yeah.
Yeah, there are lots of things I think sometimes we think, Christians should just automatically know how to do X, Y, and Z. And, those things have to be learned. And God has to put us in those places. That's really great. Can you talk a little bit more broadly about just your work in particular and how your own thoughts about your work have changed, particularly in relation to your faith? Like, how has God helped you increasingly come to see your work as a good way of serving the needs of people in the world? And just how do your faith and work relate at this point in your life?
Yeah, it's something that I've struggled with my entire career. Just like what my work means. When I moved here, I had no idea why I was following this job. I remember one of the first churches that I visited before I found Central. It was Kirk of the Hills, and the first week I went there, they announced that the next week was going to be at the golf tournament was going to be across the street, so they were going to have service at Covenant, and I was like, oh, cool, I want to check Covenant out. And Brian Chappell, who was the president at the time, preached, and he preached on Abram being called out of his land from his family and moving to another location, and I felt like the spotlight was like was on me, and it was like he was just preaching to me.
Like if he just said Nathan,
yes,
like you wouldn't have been surprised.
So, I mean, that kind of gave me confidence that I was where I was supposed to be, regardless of whether I knew why. But I had both of my parents worked, and they kind of modeled faith and work a little bit different. My dad had a good job, but it was to some degree a 9-to-5. But his job, he never took work home, and all of the time outside of work he devoted to other things that investing in other people's lives. And there was a few years when I was working in Richmond, and we would at lunchtime you'd go out, and there were like food carts all around town, and so I would constantly run into my dad, and he was with some young guy that had been a recent grad from the University of Richmond, and he'd been investing in this guy's life while he was in college, and he was continuing to mentor out of college, and so my dad had this way of he was living his faith. And the work that he did gave him the opportunity to do these things. Whereas my mom, she definitely had, I would say, a calling in the work that she did. She was a administrator of the largest OBGYN in the state of Virginia. It started when she started there was 3 doctors, and by the end it was like 40 and multiple hospitals. And she had she had a vision of this holistic women's health And so they were bringing all sorts of different areas of women's health into their, what was just an OBGYN was now this greater health thing. And to the point when she passed away from cancer in 2017, they have an imaging center that's the Brenda B. Burgess Imaging Center. That's neat. And her vision and her ethic for work is just like, it's quotes on the walls everywhere. It's pretty neat. And so I had these like two ideas of what faith and work could look like. The interesting thing is, my wife Megan, she teaches at WashU in the PT program on the med school campus, and she definitely has a calling, and it's neat to see her flourish there. And then me, I have that 9 to 5 that is consistent. I don't have to take work home, and so it's allowed me to invest a lot in my kids, and then here at church and other things. That's not to say that like my work doesn't matter, because I do believe it does, and the bringing integrity and hard work and those things is really important. And I think it's important. Like I look at my mom's example; she was excellent at what she did, and so when she spoke, her words had gravitas. Like people listened, and so I know that like I don't have much influence in people's lives that I work with if I'm slacking off or not doing good work. So, yeah.
Yeah. And there are a few things going on with bonds these days.
Yeah, it's a little crazy right now.
For sure. So, what are some of the particular practices or habits that really are important for nurturing your faith, helping you grow right now? Whether ministry groups or just your own personal practices, those kind of things.
Yeah, I've well, the nature of what I do can be really stressful, and so like having a place where I can relieve that has been really important. I early on, it would just like bottle up and then like come out in random places. Like I remember I was playing in a men's league soccer in Virginia, and the ref made a really bad call, and I just sort of lost it on the ref. And my friends on my team were just like, "What is Nathan doing?" This is like, and I, like the second it happened, I realized like I gotta figure out something. And so like figuring out how to release through like whether it's working out or whatever. I needed to figure out how to relieve that stress. Having people that are going through similar things to me, I found that really important to find people that I can talk to and just talk out life. I use, again, my parents as an example. They've been in a community group my entire life. Like the group still meets to this day. And so they all had kids together, and they all had grandkids together, and having similar community here has been really important to me. And then just finding those rhythms where I can feed myself, whether that's quiet time or just extra study. Yeah,
that's great. What are some areas that you can identify that you already mentioned some a little bit, just kind of coping with stress is, an ongoing issue for, I think, all of us. What are some places where you would say I'm still struggling? Or where are there places that emerge sometimes where you maybe experience doubt or, frustration, struggle with God?
Yeah. I would say that, like, as far as like faith doubt, like that's less and less as I've gotten, I guess, more mature in my faith. But where the doubt creeps in is when I don't surrender outcomes to God, and I try to hold those and deal with them myself. And so it's it's being able to just submit to God. And I've had moments where you just you feel like you can't see the future, and there's just like this fog. And so it's moments like that have drawn me to more prayer and more dependence on God. And I have a feeling that's probably going to be a lot of my life going forward, is like God sort of bringing me back to him with these moments where I just don't know what the future is going to be.
Yes, you have children. That's what you signed up for.
Yep.
So, that is right, for sure. Absolutely. Could you just say a few more words? You mentioned your community group. Could you say a little more about that, just about how that took shape and how that's been an important part of your life here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, some people are in here that are in the community group. This was, man, we've been together over 15 years. It was started by Jay Thomas, who was a pastor here, and I kind of latched onto him and was like, "Hey, I know you have a community group. Can I be in it?" and so he's like, "Yeah, sure." And so I joined, but I was single at the time, and the group was a lot of kind of young married and single people, and a lot of us have gotten married and had kids, and we've sort of lived life together, which has been pretty neat. It's definitely been a source of friendship and growth together, which has been pretty neat to experience.
Yeah. That's awesome. Last question here, and then we'll do some Q&A. This is a really good question from Cole. What would you say to someone who's curious about Jesus but unsure where to start?
I mean, I would point them to the Bible first of all. I mean, one of the questions that I've heard asked is, if you were to design your own God, what would he look like? And oftentimes, the picture that people would describe is often a picture of who Jesus is. And especially in our culture, most people have been exposed to the church somehow, and they've either have fond memories of it, but often those that are not in the church, they've had bad experiences where they've been scarred, and it's terrible and it's lamentable, but it's not necessarily the true experience that the church offers and that Jesus offers. And I think God can be a scary character, and if you read about him in the Bible, you see God's wrath, especially in the Old Testament. But when you look at Jesus, you see love, you see compassion, you see just this perfect embodiment of what we were designed to, how we were designed to live and flourish. And so, get to know Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a good but not a tame lion.
Yeah.
For sure. Great. Thank you so much for talking. Let's do some Q&A, and so that we can get that on the audio, the questions on the audio, we've got a mic we're going to send around. So would someone be willing to take that around for us? Just be a runner to do that? That'd be great. That would be great. Thank you, Hannah. All right. So the floor is open. Who's Nancy?
I would love to know how God brought you and Megan together.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I moved here in 2008 for work. Megan had actually moved here also from Virginia to St. Louis for grad school at WashU. And she found Central, and shortly later I found Central as well. And we met in the, several iterations before this Sunday school class. We met in that Sunday school class. Yeah. But it was crazy because we were both from Virginia, about an hour apart, and as we got to know each other, we realized all these people that we knew in common, but we'd never actually met. So.
Hi. Thank you for sharing those parts of your story. I feel like I wish my husband was here because there's a lot that we can relate on, especially from him being in that 9-to-5 world at Boeing. But I think my question, even though I have a lot that I could ask you, just centers around you and mentioned that moment with the referee. And I think something that I can relate to and Zach can relate to in your story is like growing up in the church. And for us, sometimes that came with like this pressure of we should know how to respond, like we should know what to do. And we've even talked like in recent years kind of about how we like envied some of our friends who had these like pretty radical conversions in adulthood. Because it was almost like we held ourselves really to these kind of unrelenting, unrealistic standards growing up because we felt like we had to. And obviously that was like some of our own immaturity, but I can recall so many of those moments that I had personally where I'm like, oh man, what was that? Like, who was that? And so I'm just curious how that was for you and kind of like what you did as a result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like if you have a story similar to mine, where you grew up in the church, you had parents that grew up in the church, it's a tremendous blessing. I mean, you could call it privilege, you could call it blessing. There's a lot of things you could call it, but I guess the main point is that it had little to do with me, and so really the only way I can respond to it is with humility. That I am where I am today, not necessarily because of myself, but a lot of the way that I was nurtured, the way that I was exposed to the Christian faith. There was really no other response than to accept it, in my opinion. And so, yeah, I can only respond with humility. And you have those moments where you don't live up to whatever expectation of that. It is interesting, like when you are known as the Christian in a group, like a lot of the decisions are already made for you. Like the group will sort of respond for you. And so, yeah. So you have these moments where you're flawed and it's exposed. And it's like, well, we're all that way. And so I have my bad moments. And but because I'm not judging those that are around me, like there's often room for forgiveness, or it's like, you know, that's not the Nathan that we know. That's just, you know, everybody has their bad moment type of thing.
And like we're often our own worst, like harshest critic, at least for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in financial services, so God and Mammon, how do you handle that?
Sorry, what was that?
God and Mammon, how do you handle that working in financial services?
Yeah. I mean,
Can someone define mammon?
Money,
Okay.
wealth, and all the power that comes with it. Yeah, that kind of sums that all up. Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely places in financial services where I could get caught up in the pursuit of money. I sort of landed in a place where, I mean, I definitely get compensated well, but I don't. It's not like what I do determines how much I make. I'm not commission driven or anything like that. But usually on either side of the phone is somebody that is, and so a lot of the stress in my work is put on me from other people, and so thankfully I'm not in the same pursuit, so I can just sort of sit there and try to help calm people down. I often find that's my job. Part bond trader, part therapist. Yeah.
That's great.
I knew it. It wouldn't be Sunday school if John Paw didn't have the last question. Yes.
This is the last question? Okay, a question.
No, we have lots of time.
Okay, good, guys. Like, I'll give it to somebody else if they want. So you mentioned friendship, and that you felt like you were not the best friend you could be compared to your other non-believing friends. So what did you learn about friendship from them, and how did you grow?
Yeah. So my I guess my community that was in the church, especially in Virginia, we were super close and we did a lot of things together. But there was I don't know, it wasn't necessarily the ultimate priority that our friendships. There was something that was higher, and appropriately so. But amongst my non-Christian community, friendship, like purpose and meaning, a lot of it was tied up in belonging, and the belonging that without having a God to belong to, that belonging was found inside friendship. And so the way that they cared for each other and the way that they were like there when you needed it was it was amazing. It was convicting because I wasn't as quick to be there. At least, I learned from them how to just be a better friend to people. So yeah, I think we can all be better friends. Yeah, I don't know.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, well, like we had one friend who moved here. He wasn't married, but he was in this cohabitation situation. And when we moved here, she saw that as an opportunity to get out of something that he thought was permanent, and she was just ready to end. And when we got here, he was just devastated and in a state of depression. And there'd be times where it's like, most nights he just needed people around him. He needed his community, and there were guys that were there every day for him. Where I was like, I got this, I got that, So I realized that like they were being a better friend than I was to him. I mean, I was trying to be there for him, but it was their priority. Was he needed it, and they were there for him. The one thing that was interesting, though, a flip side to it is that as we kind of made St. Louis our home, I kept having more and more conflicts with like what we would do. Like we kind of we called it family night. Sunday nights we would have dinner together at somebody's house. It was a pretty neat time, but more and more, I can't make it to that. And people are like, what are you doing? Like, why, where are you going? And I was like, well, I've got these friends. And like, they're like, how are you making new friends? And I was like, well, I met them at church. And it was just, they were amazed at how quickly I was able to make community here when they weren't finding that same opportunity. And it was because of church. So.
This is sorry. This is kind of a build off of that, but I was just curious because we talked about this in the past. But how to be a fisher of men? So when you find yourself in your work, how are you using that opportunity? Because you said you have a lot of coworkers who don't believe. Mm-hmm. So, you kind of just hinted at it right there. But how do you demonstrate that to people so that you can kind of help, be an example at the very least in that situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wouldn't say that I do it perfectly, but it was interesting. I didn't know how I would be a witness to my coworkers when I first started, but it ended up being quickly apparent that I was a Christian. And so they saw me like, it wasn't always that that I would be having these overt conversations about faith, but when they ran into problems, they would often come to me because I'm like, oh, he's the one person that seems to have an idea what's going on. And so I ended up like coworkers like in Virginia, but then here, I've been sort of a counsel of last resort for a lot of people where they said, okay, he's got something that's different, and I want to know how he deals with the same kind of stress, the same, or what's his opinion. And so being a witness in the way that I work and trying to do it with integrity and hard work, so that I'm respected, but also just loving people around me, so that they know that they can come to me. I'm not going to judge them, but maybe I can point them in a better way.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not the only Christian in your workplace and in your life, do you run into people who are like have an animosity towards faith and in Christianity and church and all those things, so they kind of keep you at arm's length on that? And like, do you have people where when you talk about God or try to enter in a conversation about God with them, they kind of slither away for a little bit? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say that might happen sometimes with people that I don't know that well. But I feel like if you get to know me or we get to know each other, like that animosity kind of falls away. I think there's something in relationship that you start to respect each other a little bit more, as long as it's two-way. If I don't show respect and curiosity, I think is a big thing. It's easy, I think, for Christians to think that we know the answers, because in one way we do. We know that the answers to the ultimate things, but there's just a lot of stuff that we don't know and we can learn from the people around us. And so being curious, I think, is huge. I want to add one thing, that I think it's easier to deal with those harder conversations when you've had a lot of easier ones, when like you've seen yourself be accepted by people that have gotten to know you, and they might not believe what you believe, but you get that level of respect. Then it's a little bit easier to have those harder conversations, knowing that you've had some wins, I guess, in the smaller ones, and you don't have to be somebody different. You can be accepted by who you are. I don't know. If that makes sense.
Hi, Nathan. Mark wishes that he were here, but he's not feeling well this morning. 2 questions. I'll give you the easy one first. Do you still associate with this group of friends?
Yeah. Some of them have drifted apart and moved and stuff, but a lot of them we still try to get together.
Nice. This may be an unfair question, and you don't really have to answer it. But you mentioned that your mom was a leader in women's health, and yet she died at a fairly young age of a women's health issue. Mm-hmm. Have you been able to reconcile that? Has God spoken to you in any way through that?
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I would imagine that's been very hard.
Yeah. No, it is a good question. Yeah. So my mom died of breast cancer, and it was her 3rd bout with it. Like, it just kept coming back. I would say the reason that I've been able to cope with that is the fact that she did it. There's a ministry in Richmond called Needle's Eye, and it was a ministry that was for working professionals, and so they would bring in speakers like in professional fields and to talk about their work and their faith. And they had Tony Bennett come and speak, not the singer, but the basketball coach for the University of Virginia, and he had 5 pillars that he tried to instill into his players. And this is like, he saw his mission as he was building up men, and he wanted to build them up with these pillars. And they were like teamwork, and one of them was thankfulness. And so he gave this talk, and Needle's Eye Ministry decided this was great. Let's unpack each of these pillars. So they had somebody in the community speak on each one. And my mom was approached to do the one on thankfulness. And this was after she had gotten kind of her terminal diagnosis. And so she gave a pretty amazing talk on thankfulness and why she is thankful, and despite like her life circumstances. So, yeah, it's on YouTube. You can actually pull it up and watch it. Brenda Burgess. Yeah.
Nathan, okay, my question is, how do you and Megan parent your kids, or what are your family's values as far as their friendships, both in the neighborhood and at school? Obviously, they have church friends, but how do you get involved? How do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
As far as do they have Christian friends? Do they have non-Christian friends? And what is is it more missional? Do you protect them? Do you let them go?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's definitely something that is sort of an ongoing conversation between Megan and I as we raise our kids. And we want them to be exposed to as much as possible where we are able to engage with them as they experience it. So our kids are in public school. They have a lot of friends that are not Christian in that context. And it's been neat to get to know the kids, but also the parents as we go through similar experiences together. But I think it's just important as we expose our kids to, and we've had our oldest, when he was in kindergarten, he came to us once, and his friend didn't know Jesus, and he was really sad about that. And so we talked through it with him, and so we just being alongside them as they kind of unpacked what they experience, so that they have appropriate context with which to filter those experiences, and so that it always comes back to where their faith is, where their their foundation.
So much of what we've heard from you so far explains who the Nathan is that's sitting in front of us. So I will describe it as looking through the rearview mirror. My question has to pivot that, looking out the front of the car into the future for you. What do you envision, or how do you equip yourself for continued spiritual growth? What do you see that pathway looking like, and how do you engage in that in a process that you think will continue your growth path?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I mentioned curiosity before. I also am just a curious person by nature. I like to learn new things, and so I kind of constantly I love history, and so I try to couple that with the context of the stories that we read in the Bible, and the historicity that is attached to that. I think it's important to understand that story better, but it's not ultimate. I think we're not called to get everybody get an MDiv and understand everything about the theology that's going on there, but we are called to love and to honor God and to love people. And so that's kind of my focus. How can I do that better? How can I be a better friend? Show the love of Jesus to people. And so, I try to equip myself with that in mind. Don't make it too complicated, I guess.
Yeah, does baby have questions? would ask, how do you see the legacy of your dad influence how you want to parent your children?
Yeah, I think it's big. I talked a couple times about rhythm and trying to be an example of that to my kids, and trying to show them what faith looks like on a daily basis, and try to get them to find similar rhythms.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you. This has been a really wonderful time. How about we thank Nathan? Yeah, thanks so much. It was really great. Let me pray, and then we'll be done this morning. Lord, thank you so much for your work in Nathan's life and Megan's life and their kids, for all the ways that you've been shaping them and helping them grow. Lord, thank you for the ways that they model your love and grace to us and to the other people in their lives. We pray that you would help us together learn to just delight in the stories of what you're doing and to have eyes to see that and help each other see it, Lord, so that we might walk in your faithfulness together, that we might become the friends that you've made us to be to one another. Thank you so much for the gift of friendship with you and with one another in your family. We pray you'd help us do that all. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks, Nathan and Mike, for a wonderful interview, and thanks to all those who asked great questions. If you want more information about Central Church, you can go to centralpres.com. More information about growing together can be found there as well, or on our Instagram. We would love to get you involved in whatever ways you would like, and so reach out to us. This week, I pray that you go knowing that you are loved and that you would be a people of love wherever God has put you, and we will see you again soon.